everyone. My name is Senya. Thanks for coming. Oh, louder. Beautiful. Hi, everyone. My name is Senya. Thanks for coming out tonight. I know it's been a really interesting, maybe boring, but for some of you, but I think really interesting day, march out in the streets. I initially had this great poem I wanted to read, but we, Black Rose, some crazy stuff happened. And so I'm just going to do a little bit of a different intro than what I wanted to do initially. So my name is Senya, like I said. I'm from Hackensack, New Jersey, this little town, Wall City, across the river. I come from a working class immigrant family. My mom's from Colombia, my father's from Ecuador. They are immigrants, and I grew up poor. I came to anarchism because I was interested in combating oppression in every facet of my life, whether it's class, gender, racism, and that's the kind of anarchism that I'm interested in doing, one that is organizational, one that is social anarchism, one that addresses oppressed communities, the ones that I grew up in. And so I just wanted to talk about something that happened earlier today that's very disconcerting. Black Rose, which I'll talk about a little bit later, the organization that I'm a part of, we participated in a march, and during one of the breakaways, one of our members was attacked by a white man, black masked guy, anarchist. And that's really not fucking cool. I'm really not interested in that behavior. It's misogynistic, it's fucked up, you know, the community needs to be held accountable to that kind of shit, because that does not fucking fly here at all. So that's probably going to come up. Just wanted to give you all a heads up in the conversation. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about Black Rose and talk about the event tonight. We have some fabulous people from across the Northeast. We're going to talk about the work they're doing, the organizing they're doing in their different communities. And so, just as an intro, this event is called Anti-Racist Praxis and Anarchism Notes on Ferguson and Beyond. It's been organized by Black Rose Anarchist Federation. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what Black Rose is, and then we'll get into why we're here. So for those of you who don't know, Black Rose is a new national anarchist federation formed about a year ago. We draw upon and are inspired by a range of traditions from anarchist communism, anarcho-syndicalism, feminism, queer liberation, abolitionism, anti-racism, immigrant struggles, among many other struggles. And there are about 15 or so locals across the U.S. Here we have one in New York City. There's some in Chicago, in Iowa City, in Miami, and so forth. If you're interested in learning more, we have more information in the back. Mark, you can just raise your hand. And
also mention this.
Oh, right. We wrote a statement, Black Rose, on the current moment and how we can push the energy and rage to the next level. So please check that out. It's we all worked on it collectively, and I think it's a great piece. And so initially, we planned this conversation before the Eric Garner non-indictment. We plan to do a kind of nationwide report back from Black Rose comrades, who I'll introduce very shortly, and anarchist comrades as well. And as you all know, there was a non-indictment, and shit went crazy, as it should, right? And so the recent weeks, what we've seen is die-ins, protests, mobilizations, militant action under the banner Black Lives Matter. And so what we're seeing is Ferguson is not just in Ferguson, Ferguson is everywhere. And that's something that I hope we can address and talk about tonight. And so what we're witnessing is really a very fascinating, important national movement for racial justice that has, and what's very exciting for some of us who are anarchists, strong anti-authoritarian tendencies. And so tonight we're going to hear about what anarchists can learn about these ongoing popular struggles, against racism and police murder. And more importantly, how can anarchist and anarchist thought, not fucked up kind of shit, but really anarchist thought help to expand resistance beyond the tired calls of body cameras, new police chiefs, civilian review boards that don't do shit, to target the underlying nexus of white supremacy and state violence behind the constant killing of black and brown folks. And so tonight we're going to talk about precisely this anti-racist practice and anarchism with some amazing dedicated anarchist militants from across the Northeast who I'm going to introduce right now. So first we'll have Lou de Jesus from Black Rose, Buffalo. Lou is an anti-state communist from Buffalo, New York. She works on prisoner justice, prison abolition, mass incarceration, and support for COINTELPRO era and current political prisoners. And she's interested in coalition building across traditional barriers. Natasha is from Rochester, New York. She is with BLACK, B-L-A-C-K, Building Leadership and Community of Knowledge. She's an anarcho-communist living in Rochester, New York. She's a founder of this local organization, BLACK, and works on issues of police brutality, education, mental health, and individual empowerment that affect black communities. And lastly, we don't have one of our speakers, but we have Sergio, right?
Yes.
From Providence, who I don't have a bio for, so please just introduce yourself.
I'll introduce myself. I don't know what to introduce myself with. I'm Sergio from Providence. I've been based in Providence, grew up there in Rhode Island. I am a member of Black Rose and identify as anarcho-communist, and have been committed to local work in Providence around police brutality as well as student issues, and an organization locally that I'm most affiliated with is End Police Brutality PVD, which has emerged from local struggles and has kind of taken on the role of kind of like the TMOC in Providence. And I'm also involved in student organizing through Life, Live, Inspire, Fight, Educate.
Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do basically, it's going to be a little bit more formal than, yeah. And so we're going to start with Lou, more or less 10 minutes each person. They're going to talk about their report back from Ferguson, what it was like there, and just your thoughts on the current moment. And then we'll move on to have a broader discussion about anarchism and anti-racism and open it up for folks in the audience to discuss. So please.
Thank you. I would say I went to Ferguson for the Weekend of Resistance in October, and was amazed to see the unity, which is not to say sameness of thought, but unity, solidarity, tenacity, bravery, sheer, I don't know, outlastingness, perseverance, and that was a wonderful thing to see. It was a beautiful thing to see. And so I got back to Buffalo, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna do this. This is about life or death. Come on, surely we can fucking pull it together for like death. Not the case. Not the case at all. Immediately, like the day after the protest for Michael Brown, an unaffiliated anarchist comrade and I had just put that together because people basically didn't give a shit. They were, oh wow, that sucks. But we just kept building and reaching out and building, and like 300 people came out. So all of a sudden, my associates that were paid organizers are blowing up my phone. Oh, what's going on? How can we help? How can we do this and that? And called a meeting for the day after Thanksgiving. I couldn't understand why I was pissed. Like, we don't operate that way. It's got to be, even the very time and date of the place we're going to meet has got to be by consensus. Otherwise, you know, what is this about? And they were all white. But the good thing that happened because of that, I don't know, can I not mix words here?
Please do not.
Because they showed their ass so blatantly it made really good room for my comrade and I to come along and say, you know what, we're sorry you're all here the day after Thanksgiving. Those people called a meeting without saying, they're all part of this kind of organization, that's not how we do things. And by just sort of consistently sticking to that, if it's, everybody wants to meet at 8 o'clock at the juice bar, if the consensus is that, then that's what we will do. And that's been wonderful because it's allowed people that would ordinarily obviously have felt no particular power, a lot of young black men that don't want to do the clergy route and obviously aren't paid organizers, that were kind of getting turned off, that they see that this is not like that. This is not the way we work, and I've told them little things about Black Rose, little teasers, and shown them some literature, and said that this is what it means to be a part of an anarchist organization. It does not mean necessarily, unless you want it to, like riding solo somewhere. It means just working with like-minded people and that there's that much respect. We've done a lot of kind of things that are surprising for Buffalo, probably not surprising for other cities, but surprising for Buffalo. People don't do things like die in there. People don't do things like block streets and confront the police. And we've been able to do that. But I think the best moment for me thus far, the most promising moment, was we sort of have we call it the action focus group. And that's where people that just want to do shit go. And then there's like an open meeting Saturday afternoon where people that want to legislate for body cams and, you know, this is about coalition building. So Saturday afternoon, they all get to talk about that. And Commissioner for, I don't even remember his name, the Commissioner for Public Housing came, because they're having a huge issue. Worse, I will say, categorically worse than the Buffalo PD are the BMHA police and the Transit Authority police. So they're working on, you know, trying to stop having people getting fucked up by these pseudo-cops, red cops. And so the commissioner stood up, and he's a, you know, kind of portly white guy, older guy, and he's, you know, talking about what he's done. And he goes on, and he's gone maybe 5 minutes. And this brother that had done no sort of organizing, nothing at all, he didn't consider himself political, said, listen, we already told you this space privileges people of color, women, oppressed voices. You've spoken long enough. And this man just about hit the floor and did a little flustering, and someone else said, that's enough. That's enough. And then we goodbye, goodbye, and clapped this man out of the room. So that was the most promising thing, because Buffalo is so poor. I don't even remember the numbers now. It's like 4th most segregated, 5th poorest, or vice versa. Something horrendous. And to see people becoming empowered is really fantastic. They have sort of decided amongst themselves that they were not going to take part in the clergy Al Sharpton type rally downtown thing that was happening this afternoon. And white, black, man, woman, old, young, Asian, Hispanic, they all went to the black nationalist teach-in that was being held to counter you know, this clergy bullshit. The literature was something like, well, you know, it's really about all lives, and it's just a few bad apples. So we said, no, we're not doing that shit. So that was good. So I think things are going in a good way, But like I said, by sticking to those principles, not letting any kind of hierarchy come in at all.
Yeah, I'm Natasha. I'm originally from Cleveland, but I've been living in Rochester for going on 5 years now, with the University of Rochester. So Black Building Leadership and Community Knowledge is the organization that I'm founder of. It all was started by a meeting at the end of August after Mike Brown was killed. We just kind of wanted to get as many people, you know, students, people from the community together to be like, we need to start responding in our own city. And it quickly grew from Ferguson response to just the need for a Black-led organization in Rochester, which hasn't existed since FIGHT, which was an organization against police brutality back after the 1964 riots in Rochester, the race riots there. So there hasn't, and you know, FIGHT lasted for a while. There was a big, you know, civil rights moment, and then they kind of dissolved after people thought things were better, but clearly things are not. So yeah, we managed to send 5 people, including myself, down to Ferguson for the Weekend of Resistance. I don't know what kind of things you were involved in. We knew someone else that we work with had gone to Ferguson like a month before and actually met some of the people from Tribe X, if you guys have heard of them. They're the people who did the occupation of the St. Louis University campus. They've led a lot of the major marches, a lot of the things that you probably saw around October that were really disruptive. They're really fantastic people who really were not organized before, just came together and were like, we need to deal with this. They're the kind of people who are protesting, you know, going on 150 days now, consistently. We've brought them up too. But yeah, so we went down there with them. We kind of had a plan to stick with them. There was a lot of planned stuff for the Weekend of Resistance, which was strange, including like Saturday morning, afternoon was like a big permanent march around the city that was like police guided, and it ended up in a park that had like a concert thing set up. And it was funny because we went to that and we felt real weird about it, and we had been out like just in the streets the night before. And it's funny, when that ended, we actually came back a few hours later to protest at the Cardinals game. And as we're walking down to the Cardinals game, like, we parked really far away and walked down, like there was no sign of like that anything had happened there, that any march had happened, any rally. Like they took the speakers, they took the porta potties, like there was no, you know what I mean? Like it was just very sanctioned and very quickly removed before it disrupted the lives of any, you know, people trying to go to the baseball game. So yeah, we marched on Friday night and ran into cops, got blocked off. It was our first experience like seeing really that line of cops, batons, shields, the full thing, which didn't work out for us because I guess the organizers said later that they didn't feel like they had the numbers to really push up against the cops. So that didn't end the way we wanted it to. Next day we protested the Cardinals game, and that next night was when we went to block off the Quick Trip, if any of you guys saw that. And 4 of my 5 people, including myself, were arrested. I think there were a total of 19 of us that were arrested at the Quick Trip gas station, which was the gas station that got burned down when the rioting and stuff happened. But we went to a different one. The other one is still destroyed. Yeah, so I mean, we were there, and then we were there for the beginning of the St. Louis University occupation. And coming back was definitely strange. Like we all had a weird time like adjusting and kind of figuring out like how to come back to our organization, because even some of the other leaders and founders of our organization weren't all there. So it kind of took a while for us to kind of figure out what to do with this energy. We've definitely had a lot of marches and action since then, and we also, because we're about, our mission statement really starts with like empowering the Black community. So for us, we had demonstrations the night of the Mike Brown decision and the day after. We had some demonstrations the day after the Eric Garner decision, and we also just one Sunday had a Black Lives Matter rally that we really, as we marched, like we've taken the streets, like the cops don't even bother anymore. We shut down like full, like Main Street East, like all of those. We went to the jail actually and did We See You, and we heard them shouting back at us, which was fucking sick. And then ironically, but not surprisingly, the county jail is across the street from the Board of Education. So we went over there. We did 3 die-ins the whole day, but we did a die-in in front of there. Like we just have totally taken the streets. They're gonna start getting irritated with us, and it's gonna escalate eventually. But I mean, we had 400 to 500 people out there that one Sunday. And as we were going on, like I made sure the rhetoric was not only about police brutality, but like we were saying like whose streets, our streets, but like whose city, whose schools, whose kids, whose students. Because it's all, especially in Rochester, it's super connected. Like Rochester is the 3rd poorest city in the country, also has the worst graduation rate for Black males in the entire country, which is 9%. So 91% of high school age Black men that you see in Rochester have not or will not graduate from high school. So when you think of that, like there's an incredibly high rate of police brutality. Like it happens all the time. Only recently have people been really recording it. There's a very shaky history that people are individually putting together through different organizations, but it's just kind of astounding how bad it is. And it's all related to, you know, the suspension rate in schools, so the dropout rate, to the poverty, to the segregation, to the gentrification. Like it's all so connected to us that we're kind of working on as many levels as we can. So for us, the marching and protesting is definitely an important part, because like people leave the rallies that we've done and have said thank you. Like they're really grateful to be there. They're really glad to see that solidarity. And like I said at the end of that one, I was like, I better not see you tomorrow like not giving a fuck about each other. Like you acted like you have solidarity now, you love each other, you've we're strangers and you supported each other, so like don't let me catch you tomorrow like pretending like people don't exist, like going back to your normal lives. So in that sense, it's definitely built the numbers of people and the visibility of action in our city, and we're trying to take that energy for the new year and kind of still working on things, because we're only 6 months old as an organization, into things like tutoring, reading groups. We want to have a community garden, we want to have a house. I think we need to have a field team, like really door knocking the way. Like I've been reading Ella Baker's biography and talking about how she went out when she was working for the NAACP, and how she would just go to communities and try and talk to as many people as possible. Like there's no reason, we shouldn't be doing anything until we know what people want. Like people who have lived in the city their whole life, until you knock on the door and ask a woman who's lived here her whole life, she has kids, she has grandkids, like what would you change about your community? Like if she says schools, I'm gonna do something about the schools. If she says police violence, I'm gonna keep working on police violence. But like until we actually directly ask as much of the community as possible, then we need to really check ourselves. And so we're trying to make that part of our forward movement.
Cool. So I'm assuming it's just kind of like reflections and report backs from Ferguson, which wasn't what I necessarily expected. That's cool. Yeah, I'm sorry. So we went to Ferguson. It was a group of about 14 of us, 14 to 15 of us. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it was about 14 to 15 people from Providence that went to Ferguson in mid-October for the weekend of resistance, and that shit was crazy. That shit was crazy to drive there. It was crazy to go with like 14, 15 people. I think it was like 14. I don't want to erase anybody, but I think it's 14. And just going with that many people in 2 different cars was pretty impactful. It was a little unclear as to exactly what we personally wanted out of the trip, each one of us. But I know for me personally, I was interested in developing connections with people in Ferguson. But I was also more focused on how do we develop connections between those people that did go. And then what can we do with those connections that were built and strengthened once we got home. So that kind of happened because we did go and we did fundraise and went as End Police Brutality PVD, which is cool because that only happened like a few weeks after we decided to formalize. And then I'll talk about End Police Brutality PVD in a bit more in depth. But it was a combination of folks that have been organizing through that, as well as Life, a student organization on campus at Rhode Island College. So it was kind of like loose networking of people that have been active and shown interest to go. So 14 people, we went. That was ill. The first night, I got a similar sense as Natasha, that it was very like formal and like sanctioned and things like that. And I was kind of expecting that because of like the type of messaging and the type of like the way that things came together, and also the groups that were behind the Weekend of Resistance, that being the Hands Up Coalition, which included more. It included, I don't know if it included Tribex.
Tribex is not part of, yeah, they're part of the Hands Up Coalition, like they work with them.
And Lost Voices is part of that, and Organization for Black Struggle, which has been one of like the most present organizations. So just knowing like the soup of reformist politics that have kind of like formalized in that coalition, I was not expecting, some really confrontational shit. But that was only in the day, because evidently the daytime demonstrations and the nighttime demonstrations, 2 completely different things. We did go, on that first night that we got there on the Friday, we didn't really engage much. We did go to the scheduled demonstration, and that was cool. But the day after, we went to that large one in the daytime, and that was alright. Yeah, I got the same sense as you, that it was like sanctioned, guided by the police. And I would kind of like, if there's one thing that I would kind of like to tease out and have more conversations about, is militant rhetoric but very dulled down situations. Like shut it down, how are we gonna shut it down with permitted marches? So like that type of thing was very present there. And on that same night, we did go to a night demonstration, which was outside of the schedule, and that was cool because we were able to actually see what tensions actually looked like on the ground a little bit more closely. Although some shit did pop off, in which one of the members that we were with, one of the people that we were with, there was a threat put on her life by some demonstrators there. They had, I don't know, it seemed to be like they were black nationalists, militants, you know, kind of garbed up in that new Black Panther Party type of looking thing. So we were still trying to figure out, like, are they infiltrator agitators, or are they just like hyper masculine type of black men that like kind of like it's either on the front lines or what the hell are you doing here type of shit. So it was like, it was really funky, and because we were with young folks, we unfortunately had to dip from that, and that kind of left us with a weird feeling in general. But the day after was kind of redeeming because it was specifically a workshop or space on anarchy and race, anarchism and race, and power in the streets. And that was cool because we were actually able to develop connections with people there and hear from a more militant perspective what needs were on the ground. And evidently, there's similar needs as what we need in Providence. We need space. Space to do shit is really crucial, and to see that the base is like operating here in Brooklyn is fucking ill. And even though it is small, it's still a space that we can access, you feel me? So something like that was one of the things mentioned. There was discussion of Cop Watch. We met the folks who did Cop Watch, or who developed Cop Watch in Ferguson, and that was cool in general. And then since then, coming back home from Providence has been kind of like still trying to figure out like how can we, you know, develop these connections deeper and engage in political development. But more so, how do we like actively sustain activity? And since coming back, it's kind of has those connections that we did build did strengthen. So that was really ill to see. And I guess, I don't know, moving on to, like we did an action in Providence on November 25th, the day after the indictment was released. And the general planning for that was in collaboration with the Trayvon Martin Organizing Committee, this loose network of anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalists that emerged initially out of the Trayvon Martin verdict. So to be able to build on those connections, to be able to build on those connections through concrete coordination on the national scale, but also on the local scale, was pretty telling as to how this moment has kind of like really built up a groundswell of activity, but also how this groundswell of activity has been built upon the activity from last year and from the last flare-ups and things like that. So it was cool to really see a progression of activity. And that was, so the November 25th demonstration in Providence was like the biggest that I've ever seen in Providence that was not occupied. And I make that distinction because the November 25th one was multiracial, did have a lot of black and brown youth specifically, and the energy that was present on that day was like really awesome. And at least my focus in coordinating that and, you know, organizing with people on the ground was really pushing space, basically opening up space for escalation in ways that that Providence hasn't seen in a while. So on August 20th, when Mike Brown initially got shot, we went out into the streets and went to the police department and took over the police department for about an hour and a half, 2 hours or so. And that was really cool. I think that was a practice in power for people to really take space and to really develop connections on a resistant type of tip. So this time around, we took it a step further and engaged in blockades. So we blockaded the central highway system in Rhode Island, which is 95. And that was super awesome because it was about a couple hundred people on the highway itself. It was about 150 to 200. And again, something like that hasn't been seen in Rhode Island almost ever. So to kind of like be able to push that, to be able to really capture this moment has been really awesome because we're seeing new tensions develop in which like people are engaging on one another on tactics of direct action, right? Like it's not even simply the ethics, but of like how we can sustain and how we can continue, and specifically how we can take care of one another within those aspects. I was one of the people that had gotten arrested on that day, which has been a whirlwind. It was my first time, and I had to ask permission to leave the state. So that's why I'm here today, which is some shit. But I don't know. I have a bunch of thoughts around that. But I would like to at least make a brief mention of End Police Brutality. So that organization emerged initially. Do I have time?
Just wrap it up this one.
Yeah. So End Police Brutality emerged initially out of wanting to put forward a presence of radical politics that was outside of the nonprofit structure. But it's first emerged in response to Providence Police raiding a house. And it was a small coalition of groups that kind of responded to that, but it was very grassroots. It did include like the nonprofit sector, reformist type of approaches, but at that moment is when I founded End Police Brutality to put forward, like, we don't need the police, we need to unite across blocks and things like that. And since then, we kind of use that as a local vehicle to keep on pushing that line. So for it to just jump from an effort to just build, to just put out some zines and to be, to just be digitally and kind of like, to just digitally be out there in the presence with some particular politics and only really have concrete coordination between two members, for it to grow now to like, 5+ members, 7 members, 7 to 10, if I'm not mistaken, almost 15. Members now coherent in an actual formal organization, still committed to neighborhood-based power and still committed to an anti-police approach. It's been pretty powerful to see that emerge slowly, and that's kind of my interest. How do we, in these small cities and towns, build a culture of resistance amongst Black and brown youth, and then how do we like start to engage in similar ways as Anastasia is mentioning under Black. How do we then do studying groups, tutoring groups, and mass level engagement? So that may have been all over the place, but those are my thoughts on things.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to touch upon Anastasia. You said we shouldn't be doing anything until we know what people want, which I thought was, for me, that's what good anarchism is. Organizing with folks, not in a fucked up kind of way. And so I guess just moving forward, so we can move on to a larger discussion, what do you make of the kind of anti-authoritarian tendencies that are going on? How do you think anarchism can play a role? Useful, not productive, et cetera, et cetera. So just thoughts, broadly speaking. I know you touched upon it a bit earlier, if you, or whatever you want.
God, there's so many things I've been thinking of. Maybe that kind of, that having that sort of sensibility has changed the way that things happen, even like on the level you said of what do people want. We've screened Fruitvale Station a few times for youth, and just seen sort of the, adult, I don't know what you call it, working with the youth, that because we're engaging the youth and not asking, you know, well, what is the program that you have for the children or anything, but just engaging the youth, that the people that work with it have kind of stepped back and said, you know, we've not seen them engaged like this. We've not seen them, you know, even just sit quietly through a whole movie before. And when you are able to do that, it just makes for just a healthier. I think I was telling you, anarchism makes sense because it seemed healthiest. You know, with people, they know what they want inside them, they know what they need. If that can be expressed, obviously that's health, the person, the community. And things came from that, like, without any prompting, just sort of letting kids talk, this one little boy says, well, why do we even need police? We're like, all right, let's go there. That went out. Any other thoughts? And so these kids that have really not, I don't want to say not done much, because that's not true, but they took it upon themselves to have an event for Fred Hampton Day. That was suggested then. I don't think they knew who he was before. But they wanted to have a die-in, and it was all going to be sort of, you know, sanctioned and safe, and like another crew, because there's been like another crew kind of rolling through Buffalo that's like off the chain. They show up with a speaker in the back of a U-Haul, and they're nice. They're fun. Some of them rolled through. And so I'm like, well, you know, kids, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if it starts looking not safe, then I might say something. And the children just like went, and they were with them, and one of these guys was like hopped on top of a police car, and they were shouting and they're cursing, and then he hops down, and the cops look, he's like, you see, that was nonviolent. That was nonviolent. You say it was nonviolent. They left and it was nonviolent. And the kids just felt great. So great just to be, you know, able to do what they felt they should do to express their feeling. And that's what I'm sorry. One of the girls, they're tiny little girls, and I said, you know, what do you want to do? You know, I think maybe you should stay back a little bit. And she goes, I don't want any more racist killer cops. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just go with you then, and we'll do this thing. But it's such a hierarchical city. It's like I said, got that vibe. It's like people that are paid professionals, and then clergy have a stronghold, and people are just responding to this idea that we're going to sit and, like you said, just what do you want to do? I don't particularly believe in it, but if you want to work on body cams, well then fuck, that's what we're going to do. If you want to do, what do they call them, citizen review board, then that's what we're going to do. Some people also want to continue actions and, you know, escalating, but what do you want to do? And it just, people respond to it. It's a lot easier to work with people when they feel like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting that you talk about like students and young kids, because like we did at that rally we had on a Sunday, we've called many marches Black Lives Matter marches, so they don't really have specific names anymore. We actually started with like an hour-long rally at the corner of a place where it's called Liberty Pole, and it's in the middle of the city, like near the main bus line. A lot of high school students get out of school and they just hang around there. Like it's downtown, just a place to hang out. And the powers that be don't want them there. Like they blast music from the buildings, like classical music to get the kids to leave. Like police, like write it to the kids are there, write it to the cops are there, constantly harassing them. I wasn't able to make it, but we did a few days where we went out at 2 just to hang out with the kids. Also, we want to start a culture of like, you know, older, you know, if you're, you know, 18 up, like it helps to have like young adults with these high school students out there on the corner where they can talk about whatever, like how is your day going, like how, what's going on with you, and to provide a buffer from these police who are kind of going to exercise whatever force they want on these kids because they don't know their rights. But as far as like the anti-authoritarian piece of this, it's interesting because like, to be honest, I'm in a weird place where I'm I'm very good friends with Red and Black, which is an anarchist local in Rochester. Like, those are all my friends. I'm still an anarchist. Like, I still work with them, but I took my time to focus on Black because it's a new organization and it's like something I'm really focused in. So rather than being a shitty member of Red and Black and a shitty member of Black, I'm just choosing to be one, and we, you know, there's some mutual respect on both sides. But as always, there's always kind of like individual things that kind of get out of hand when it comes to actions that may fall under the umbrella of like anarchism. And I've already had to deal with, like I was telling people today, I still have the burnt flag on my foot, on my shoe from the night of the Mike Brown decision. Like, we didn't want to do an action, actually. We wanted to do a vigil, just give people a safe space to grieve. Like, we were all crying, we were grieving. People were mad, and we were like, well, we can march. U of R is a big school, biggest employer in the city, gentrifying the neighborhood. So we marched over to the college town they've built, which is a fucking monster. But on the way back, we marched people back, and I kind of gave some closing statements, like, real actions are starting tomorrow, like, we'll be stronger, we'll be louder, like, we were super excited. And then someone who I know personally came by. He was there with us, and I didn't say anything to him because he was being supportive, and like lit a flag to burn and like dropped it and ran, and then of course got chased around by campus security. Eventually they grabbed him, which distracted all the attention to, you know, them roughing up him, which he shouldn't have been attacked or arrested by the police for that. But it was just kind of like a distracting moment of like, there are a lot of issues and pitfalls and things I want to caution on in this like delicate moment to me. Like, there's a serious moment going on. It is primarily focused on police brutality against Black people or people of color in general. But there is some reason why this movement has happened, why there's such force behind it. And there's a lot of mistakes that can happen, and I've seen happen in Ferguson, in Rochester, in New York City. And, you know, that kid lit that flag, and when I told him, you know, the next time I saw him, because I didn't get to say anything to him then, like, anything you do to, like, incite whatever you want to incite, like, if you are not consulting not only the leaders so that there's, like, some sense of order and some sense of planning and protection for the group of people that I'm leading. Like, I was leading a group of, like, about 100 students, about 100 college students, most of them students of color, most of them Black students, and he drops that flag and, like, yeah, we're on campus, it's campus security, but, like, you do that shit in the real world, like, you will get Black people shot. Like, that's what I tell people when things like that happen. Like, your random acts of insurrection, and I have all my feelings about, like, fighting back and violence and different things, but when you don't consult people of color in this specific movement, you're going to get Black people shot.
Yes.
Like, I already heard today, someone did some fucked up shit, and what happened was they pushed a trash can or did some crazy stuff and ran, and it was a white guy, and he ran, the cop turns around and grabs the Black woman, the first Black woman he sees. That is what is going to happen as this escalates. And so for me, I guess multiple things, but when we think about the need to actually move towards shutting things down for real, burning things down for real, like, I see there is some space for that in the long-term future, but that is a careful moment that I want to put on hold as long as possible in this movement, because there's so much at stake, there's so much power here, and the community that is leading it and that is being affected is the exact community that will be mowed down by the police. So that's a major caution that I wanted to make sure was brought up. But also, as far as bringing anarchism, so that's kind of the anarchism within the Ferguson movement, the Ferguson started movement. But on the opposite side, I see the anti-authoritarian sentiments like being kind of intuitive. Like, people, I mean, you know, whether you're a high school student who knows, like, fuck this teacher, fuck my principal, or like you're a Black man who's been beaten up by the police and you're like, fuck the police, like, that sentiment, I've noticed, comes very quickly from the oppression that people of color suffer, and specifically Black people. And I want to approach building that connection of, you know, organizations and movements and people of color being, you know, explicitly anti-capitalist, anti-state, anti-authoritarian, but I don't want to do it in a way that's condescending or forces certain kinds of structures on them. Like, there's certain ways of doing it that are not beneficial to Black communities, like going in and saying, like, we need to build a small organization that's, like, heavy on political education. Like, I believe in political education, and I'm actually the education chair for my organization, and I want to start reading groups, but, like, working around people's schedules, working around like how our community works. Like, I want to bring it to them in whatever way is most helpful, rather than trying to force what's already been done on a certain community that can't function that way. And someone did mention to me once, and I guess that's really the difference, is there's the need for like the cadre, the like deeply politically educated core group of people to kind of keep the ideology in line, to kind of see that big decisions are not straying away from like the necessary path that we need to go to actually end things. Like, let's not trail off into body cams, like that, you know, that's that thing. But there's also the need for the mass organization, and I think sometimes people get into those arguments, but it's a both argument. Like, you need to have mass organizations that can bring whatever you can to the community and help them in whatever way you can, where they're at and where you're at in relation to them. And then the, you know, the deep political ideology, you know, talking, reading, strategizing stuff, like, only so many people are at a stage in their life where they have that time and that space to really work towards that. And I think it needs, as long as those two are together, I think that's the best step forward.
Damn, it's kind of hard to follow that up.
this is what I think about at night, every night. Like, there is no answer to this, but like, it stresses me.
No, there definitely is no answer, and I think that's probably one of the most promising things, that like, it's a process. We're only going to be able to figure things out if we fuck up, and if we're willing to learn from those fuck ups by stepping back and like, damn, how did this thing go down? What exactly did go down? What was my role within that? What were the roles of other people within that? But I don't know, that just touches upon a lot of things. But I don't know, in terms of what to make out of the tendencies that are emerging at this current moment, specifically anti-authoritarian tendencies, we can draw a lot, and obviously we have drawn a lot from this Ferguson moment, initiated by folks there, but the tactics in which people are employing there have obviously hit the mainstream, to the point that people are kind of like more palatable. I don't know how to properly pronounce that word. People are more open to more militant tactics, and are also more open to practicing it themselves. The idea of taking a highway, what the fuck? Like, that wouldn't not have been possible. Like, I remember that there was this group or this effort or some shit at the time that TMOC initially started, back in 2013, called Block for Trayvon. I think it was only Houston at that time that had only blocked in response to the Trayvon Martin verdict. But as we can see, this time around, it was Providence, it was obviously New York, and it was other places too. And I think what it really put into context was that people are willing to step up, to like really escalate. And that's something that we can draw. You know, what can we learn from the fact that broad masses of the working class are open to face-to-face confrontation and straight-out escalation. But with that, where do we place ourselves in the tension that, or the tendency that the Anastasia just brought up of the white insurrectionary, like drive-by direct action type of thing. That is extremely unproductive. It's not sustainable, and like we were having discussions about some of these things earlier. So I think it's something that definitely has to be continued and continue to be critiqued, especially if we're thinking of anti-authoritarianism, anti-state politics, anti-capitalist politics within communities of color, or engaging communities of color, because that is very real. Like at the highway demonstration, there were several people that defiantly resisted the cops after their 2-minute warning, right? To the point that there was this probably well-known guy, Jared Paul. He's like, what the fuck is he? He's a spoken word artist, and he was a spoken word artist from Providence, and he just kind of like has this this air about him, kind of like a local cult of personality, right? He happened to be literally sitting on the ground, as there were multiple people on, like a lot of people on the highway. Yet, even though he was the one sitting on the ground, the police were arresting three black men in total that got arrested. I'm Afro-Latino. I'm still feeling weird about identifying as black. I definitely do identify as brown. But nonetheless, there were three black men that got arrested that night. And one of them was being chased literally as Jared Paul was sitting on the highway. Like, this dude was sitting on the highway just doing like his thing, right? Whereas black men were being chased by the police, being fucking brutalized with a skateboard on top of their head. So like those types of very minuscule things that that white folks don't necessarily calculate, those are the things that we kind of need to really tease out if we are committed to direct action. We need to really put into practice how do we keep one another safe, before, during, and after. And of course, that minuscule thing, that's called white privilege. Not something that's new to many people, I'm sure, theoretically, but when it's put into practice, or when the time comes when it needs to be put into practice, a critical engagement on one's own privilege, that's kind of like what needs to happen. What Jared Paul could have done in that moment, I'm not quite sure. Something funny that I saw on Facebook that a radical friend of mine through the student movement said that I would have greater sympathy for white folk, or greater love for white folk, if I didn't see videos of them saying the whole world is watching, and instead I saw them actively trying to de-arrest somebody. That's what solidarity looks like. You know that there's less heat put on you because you're white. So I'm not saying like straight up self-sacrifice and self-sacrificial bullshit, but I am definitely saying calculate risk, who is more at risk, and how can we strategize to use these state concocted divisions to our benefit to keep one another safe, right? So I don't know. I have a bunch of thoughts, but I think one of the strongest tendencies that we can like really draw upon and reflect on are the way that anti-authoritarianism is being expressed specifically amongst young black and brown working class peoples, right? And we've been talking about this with with the youth that have been engaged, and we've seen that also in Providence, because one of the most committed people is this really young woman of color, Southeast Asian. She's like still in high school and shit, and she's really awesome, and she's not the only one, and that's what's fucking awesome. That her tenacity has been something that I've also been noticing in other folks that I haven't seen before. So we've developed these new connections with these new people and things like that. And I think that's probably one of the places, right? As people are coming into practicing their politics, developing their politics and things like that, how can we relate to them in a way that's not overly theorizing, in a way that is engaging where they're at, but not in a condescending way either, right? So I don't know, but I have a bunch of thoughts, but I really think that one of the strongest tendencies now is that this is a youth-led movement, and this is a youth-led movement that seems to be open to learning, and that's really fucking awesome. And I'm hoping to really continue building with folks that and developing relationships with.
Great, so I think we're going to just, the next 15-20 minutes, just open up for discussion. So I'll take stack. Any questions? Raise your hand.
Can I say one last thing? As far as what anarchism can learn, anarchism needs black feminism. I haven't seen that put into practice. Take that for what you will.
Well, because with a totally different, another more cadre-like group that I'm beginning to work with that hasn't fully formed yet, we had a position of something called like field marshal, which would kind of be kind of a spokesperson role, but kind of, you know, front lines organizing, like talking to the people, recruiting, like people person kind of role. And we were talking about having one person for each of these roles, and I said, well, we can have, you know, one treasurer, one PR person, one this and that, but like we need a male and a female field marshal, because what you see in this person that represents leadership and like the spokesmanship role to you, like it's not going to look the same for a woman. Like that's something we need to start doing, is realizing like, you know, anti-authoritarian sentiment may not look the same in Black communities. Like anti-capitalist sentiment may not look the same in Black communities. Like realizing, and I think, like I said before, if we're going into those communities and seeing what's wrong, if we are of the privilege that we have read all the books and know the theory and can connect the dots a little quicker, like address the issues they want you to address and help people understand on a case-by-case basis why it's related to the system, and don't expect, you know, your anarchist leadership in Black and brown communities to look like what you've seen it look like before.
All right, open up for discussion. Questions or yes?
Hey, my name's Evan, and one of the things that really was really helpful to me is understanding how to make sure that we take the divisions that the state and the capital are given to us and use it to battle against them. But one question that I have that's been going on in my head for a while is about how do we make sure that we give voices to people who were oppressed, but not to do so in a way that sort of essentializes them, that makes it so that if I'm Black and therefore I have this thought, or if I'm a woman, or if I'm queer, or something like that, that we don't get into the whole privilege checking for the sake of privilege checking. How do we make sure that does not happen?
Well, I guess so first you were talking about how do we not accidentally essentialize, like if I'm speaking on behalf of the Black community, like I can't really speak on behalf of, like, understanding that. But also, could you repeat the second part of what you were saying?
Like, how do we make sure that we don't
privilege check for the sake of privilege?
Yes.
Yeah, I like had a conversation with a friend a few days before I came here, and I was talking about, like, you know, I don't know what I want to say, and I guess it would kind of depend on the audience, because, you know, a lot of me, when given the chance to speak, wants to really protect this movement and, like, say a lot of cautionary things. But there's also a lot of stuff that, like, you know, I had a conversation, a one-on-one with, you know, one of my white males, his friends, and I know he understands certain things, and I know certain things about his background, like he grew up in communities of color and things like that. And so, like, you know, telling him every single day, like, don't forget that, like, you're white, you can't lead this movement, is not what is most helpful. Like, this friend understands things, and, like, once I trust someone to a certain stage, like, there's different things that can be done. Like, at the end of the day, you know, follow people for what their purpose or their plans are, not because of, you know, color, gender, whatever lines. Like, you know, not every woman that I see leading alongside me is making the right decision. Not every Black person alongside me is making the right decision, especially when you get to intersectionality with, like, you know, Black men or white women, or all kinds of different stuff like that. But I guess it's, you know, we all kind of have to just keep checking ourselves that you aren't essentializing someone's perspective on a situation, and are open to the idea that maybe those two perspectives, like, you know, two Black women can say two different things on the movement, and that it can mean something different. But yeah, and yeah, like, I mean, if people really understand and really do, you know, like, for white allies, if you really do understand what it means to be an ally by not putting people in danger, by not putting the movement itself in danger, you should be and will be accepted when the time is appropriate, but there's a certain amount of caution I put up right now to protect what's going on.
Any other thoughts?
I think that's pretty fair. I don't know. It's a question that I'm still, like, trying to I guess interrogate within myself, and also a question that either formally or informally has been, like, really present in Providence, because we have the problem of Brown University, which is I wrote a fucking pamphlet because I fucking hate Brown University. But it acts as like a magnet for like liberal do-gooders then who get radicalized at some point and then want to do shit. But it's just a present like pain in the ass. And those liberal do-gooders a lot of the times happen to be white. So we're still kind of figuring that stuff out. So I think we should learn from what Natasha just put forward and also put a pin in it to kind of like really consistently engage. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I'd have to third that. Just caution always. I mean, some of the most, you know, kind of radical speaking, young black woman bringing the fire, turned out to have invited the fucking peacekeepers to a rally. And I had to be like, sis, you know, the Popo pays them, right? And she's like, no, I didn't know, I thought it was helping the community. So it just, oh, and not malice. I mean, she thought, well, these are, you know, like in some sort of patriarchal sense, these big, strong black guys are gonna protect us. I'm like, no, one of them was like pulling me and trying to stop the rally before we were done. And she had no clue that that kind of thing would happen. But that was a great moment. And a lot of people learned from that moment and got people kind of a step closer. So it's awkward and annoying and tiresome, but it's necessary. Then the people that just don't want to get with it just have fallen off, which is like, great, don't let them force it on the way out. Keep going.
It's conversations and discussions, so please feel, yes, please.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the geography of suburban environments, such as, and I understand Ferguson to be somewhat like, versus the very urban environments that you're organizing in, obviously the one we are in now, and what kind of similarities or differences you notice between those two spaces, what kind of different challenges they pose.
Well, I immediately thought of Rochester, however. I thought
Oh, well, yeah.
of a main
Yeah, I
drag
also
with
like-
no businesses on it.
Yeah.
Is that Buffalo? Is it Rochester? Oh wait, it's Ferguson.
Yeah, I don't know. And also Ferguson, my experience being down, I mean, because yeah, I consider we went down to St. Louis. And even Ferguson, which is a suburb, and that is significant because a lot of black people in Ferguson are moving out of St. Louis, like proper, because it is more dangerous, it is more urban, it is the city. So it is technically a suburb, but it definitely, it doesn't look like any kind of like super class divided suburb that you would imagine. Like it is still pretty lower middle class. So it doesn't look super suburban compared to somewhere like Rochester. I mean, it looks like, you know, one side of, like the west side of Rochester, for instance, rather than, you know, Pittsburgh, which is like an all-white suburb with like, you know, big shops and things like that. And, you know, all their police are from their actual city versus, you know, 90% of the police, and even the police in Ferguson aren't from Ferguson. So it's not really super suburban on that level.
I guess there's not really, I don't know, I think a lot about geography as it relates to power and as it relates to housing and things like that. We definitely don't have a Ferguson-like environment in Rhode Island. Things are definitely still kind of like concentrated in the urban areas, that being Providence, and Pawtucket and Woonsocket. If anything, Woonsocket would kind of be, I don't even know how to categorize Woonsocket. It's kind of like, it's in the throes of it's a mill town that is no longer being used because of fucking deindustrialization and shit. So it does have a high concentration of poverty, and it is a multiracial poverty. And I say that because there just isn't a strong or like a concentrated black community in Woonsocket at all. If anything, they're more Puerto Rican and Dominican folk, so Afro-Caribbean folk there. But things in Rhode Island are mainly, it's mainly Providence and Pawtucket that are like the most urban areas, therefore they attract the more racialized, police interactions and things like that. So although I have heard from even like, bureaucratic motherfuckers, say that like poverty is no doubt shifting in Rhode Island, and they are shifting to places like Coventry. They are shifting to places like Warwick and West Warwick. Right now, it's not as racialized. They're not as racialized spaces as Providence or Pawtucket. And the types of things that we're seeing in Coventry and Warwick, West Warwick, is this kind of like juncture in which shit is getting worse for those who were middle class. Definitely getting worse. Although things are like white folk and white folk are still staying in the suburbs essentially. So it's not too. We can't really draw too many connections between the fact that Ferguson is a suburbanized place and that Rhode Island, or at least that Providence, is not yet. Although we need to really be paying attention to that, and to do that, I really think that we need to commit to studying gentrification and the process of gentrification as it relates to police power, because Ferguson is really gentrification brought through its, through its fullest end. State bureaucratic motherfuckers are saying and are indicating that there is going to be a white rich take back of the city of Providence, and that they're going to be abandoning the suburbs, and along with that, poverty is going to shift into the suburbs, and that's no doubt going to take a racialized form. So we need to definitely do a study on that, but at this point it doesn't look too much like Missouri.
But yeah, the white wealthy take back of the city is happening in Rochester too. They're actually closing off. Rochester's like a weird hub and spoke city is what they call it. Like, downtown, Main Street, Main and East is like where the main bus line is, and all the buses run, like spokes of a bike. And then you get off into different suburbs, and none of them are strictly like north, west, east, and south. They're all kind of diagonal. And so people have already moved out to the suburbs, and around the city there's what we call the inner loop, which is like a very small highway. Most people who aren't from there can't navigate it, but it helps you get around the city really quickly. But they decided to close it. It was originally put in, which actually was bad. It kind of locked poor people of color into the city, like you can't really get out the way the inner loop is made, but they're filling it in and they're going to build a bunch of condos. And so it's actually, and condos are popping up everywhere, but closing that and using all the space for like an entire highway that's been surrounding the city for like obviously things that are out of the price range of people who live there, and obviously don't serve the homeless people in there. There's definitely that kind of organized, so in different cities that you guys are around, like pay attention to when things are popping up back in urban places where you're like, why does this condo here? Like it's definitely like white flight is moving back this way, and what it does is, and someone framed it to me the other day of like, people are thinking like, well, we moved out to the suburbs to get away from like crime and like people of color. Why do we have to move away from our jobs? We're moving back in. They can go out there and deal with the buses themselves. That's how someone framed it to me who was from Rochester. And it's like, we'll die off. We'll literally die off. If we're pushed to the suburbs, our bus system is not very well set up. People aren't going to make it to work. Winter's going to be really rough. Like, people can't really survive when you reverse white flight back into urban spaces and then take it over and gentrify it.
That specific thing is what's happening in Rhode Island. They're gentrifying the bus system. Shit, I can fucking talk about another hour about how that's happening. But that specific thing is definitely happening, and that I could talk again more about it, but I would recommend checking out Rent is Theft, which there are 3 copies over there. New Ghettos Burning by Ocha.com, or Generation Zero, that's online. And then the Unity and Struggle piece, I forgot what what it is, but Ferguson breaks out of history. Each of those really deal with the geographics of cities and geographics of poverty and racialized poverty, and also specifically touches upon rebellion and police violence. So I'll definitely look at those things. And Land is Liberty by Research and Destroy in California. I would definitely recommend each of those readings.
So maybe just like series of questions, and then yeah, sure.
And does Black Rose have an idea of where the organization wants to go with the issue of racism in cops in prisons right now? Do they have an idea, campaign, or program for moving forward, or the groups discussing it, throughout the network?
Does anyone answer that?
I guess I could talk about what the anti-criminalization committee is doing. There's been ongoing prisoner support. There is one comrade who's incarcerated. And then also the organization has been, although I'm just at large in Buffalo, been really supportive and helpful with the political prisoner work I've been doing. So that's been a part of it. Gosh, it just seems like it's such a focus. Materials, written materials, educational materials, even just like straight the funding for us to be able to go to Ferguson. It's very, 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 very present in the thought of the Federation.
I know some stuff that has kind of like emerged from the anti-criminalization committee, and I don't know exactly where we are in kind of forward-facingly talking about this. So I guess I'll just mention it briefly. But there is an emerging media project that's coming out that's actively being worked on. Not anything with like a concrete date as of yet. But there's an effort to kind of like cohere around this kind of moment and really provide a space for like media engagement, not in like the mainstream media bullshit, but more of like generating our own media and kind of like carving out space for anti-authoritarian, anti-capitalist tendencies to kind of have a space. And it's not going to be only Black Rose either. It's an effort that's going to be coordinated between Black Rose members, folks part of Trayvon Martin Organizing Committee, and then other anti-state, anti-capitalist tendencies. And essentially, it's gonna kind of like, I think the project is aimed to build presence online and to connect with youth on a digital platform, which may sound simple, but external education and media engagement is super crucial at this moment. So I think that's one of the directions in which I know that Black Rose is kind of throwing some energies towards. And I really think probably just strengthening our locals to kind of have like internal conversations about this. And to be quite honest, I'd kind of like to connect with y'all to kind of further speak more about what that could look like across our locals and then as an organization in general. But I just know that the main thing that I've been in conversation with has been around the media project and external education and things like that. I'm particularly interested in starting up studying groups and engaging in like political development. So things like that is what I see going forward for Black Rose. But of course, if anybody else has had different conversations.
I mean, I guess in terms of like programmatic intervention, this is a very new organization. Even though clearly some of the work that comrades have been doing in their goes it might be longer even. So I just think, at least in it's I think from my understanding at least, what has been, I've just been what's been communicated back to me about the Anti-Criminalization Committee is just like what are some more of the immediate needs that we can be meeting as things are really kind of escalating. In terms of this like long-term trajectory, you know, we have like locals and at-large comrades just like all over the country, and things have a very, very distinct geography. I actually lived in Rochester, and when we met to New York, it's like an insanely different terrain to organize in, despite facing similar issues. So I think that just from a kind of like organizational like development perspective, it's something that is certainly like on, you know, the long-term agenda of like what it means to really be building a political organization, what it means to be building a political anarchist organization. But all the same, I just think with like the way that things are kind of escalating around the country, it's really, really so early to see like what things can turn into. And I think what like the comrades here are doing, you know, just whatever, whether it means Black Rose or as anarchists, about building a base and really building like certain types of practices and honing in and developing like these anti-authoritarian tendencies that are emerging from the contradictions of capitalism is like the strongest thing that we can do in terms of envisioning the long term, because like ultimately the work that isn't very sexy, the work that is the everyday is like what's going to build what we really want to build. And I think we do have some literature on the World Revolutionary Organization that Serbia brought, which kind of shed some light on what we really want to kind of direct as what it really means and what it would look like to have a national anarchist organization.
Some
Last
thoughts about
thoughts,
that?
maybe?
Yeah, if you guys have thoughts.
I wasn't here for the
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't
thing
here.
last night, which sucks.
We're all just kind of
I hope somebody recorded it. I don't know. Damn. No. That sucks. Well, I heard that it was good. But I know that it's TMLC folks that put it on or whatever. And my general sense from some of the folks that I know are part of it, basically I'm in agreement with you that the 20th century politics, or the politics of the 20th century, aren't necessarily going to translate well for today, which is why we need to study them. And which is why we need to try to draw upon, I do feel as though even if they may not translate perfectly until like the 21st century context, we definitely do need to draw upon those political ideologies to really try to formulate a new political tendency, whether that has the name of anarchism, whether it has the name of autonomous Marxism, whether it has the name of whatever the hell it may be. I just know that I don't want a state, that I am for people being able to access their needs as they need and being able to reproduce themselves as they need. That's essentially anarchism to me. But it may take a new name as new ideologies develop in order to address new problems. Because we are in a particular moment in late capitalism, advanced capitalism, in which capitalism is dying, but not unless we pull the trigger. And we won't know how to pull that trigger unless we figure out what our enemy looks like and how the enemy manifests and reproduces itself. So we definitely do need new political ideologies and tendencies, and we can only get there through studying, through practicing, and then through reflection. And I really like the point that you raised earlier about, you know, trying to bring in basically anti-authoritarianism and anti-capitalism are not going to look how we typically think they'll look in Black or brown communities. And I think that's a really key insight that really kind of like does, you know, corroborate what your feeling is. So.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying about like it may not be called anarchism. Like I was saying before, like I'm in a weird position where like I'm with an organization that is to empower the Black community and is like loosely anti-capitalist. We have some meetings we need to get through before the new year to like maybe add some points of unity to the mission statement. And you know, obviously I'm going to push it in that way because I don't think we're going to get far without it being, you know, anti-capitalist, anti-authoritarian, anti-state. But whether or not I'm going to, you know, continue to shove the word anarchist down the throats of, you know, my Black comrades is a different thing. And I think, I guess as kind of like a closing note, like I'm like I said, this question of what to do now is like what keeps me up at night. Like I don't know what to do, and I'm dealing with that as carefully and as cautiously as I can. But I guess like in this stage where we don't know what to do, where the marching phase is kind of waning, and what we should do next. Like I really think that like if you're in an organization or if you're an individual who's trying to organize and you're at a loss for what to do, like just do something for the people. Like add more people to your crew, have more followers if you consider yourself to be a leader. Like know more people, do more helpful things, like address more issues for oppressed people. And the next step of whatever that political ideology is going to be called, or the solution to another world. Like if we really want to see that other world, like we should work on empowering as many oppressed people as possible in the meantime. To me, that's the next step, is getting as many people who have been told you don't have power, you don't have rights, you don't have freedom, to feel that for the first time, and for them to step up. And then whatever we call it, in the future, whether it's anarchism or whatever, doesn't matter to me. We just need to get more people actually having enough personal empowerment to make any steps forward, because at this point I don't think we do.
I agree.
Okay, all right, on that note, thanks so much for coming out. I guess we'll have sort of a formal hang out just for a bit. First, just wanted to thank the base for hosting us. It's a wonderful if you're learning more about Black Rose, we have a mailing list. We have Lit over there. Check out our recent statement on the current moment. We have our political organization.
The role of the revolution.
The role of the revolutionary organization, which is a great pamphlet. And have a great, safe evening. Thanks so much for being here.